Good afternoon, folks. We are the MMA Sucka crew. Tim Wheaton, joined by Frazer Krohn, the editor at MMA Sucka. Frazer, what's going on this week? How are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. I've been getting really stuck into the Olympics. It's always one of my favorite times of the year, well, every 4 years or 5 years in this case. But if you haven't caught Tim's piece on the website about the top 10 Olympians to compete in MMA, definitely go and check that out because it's a really interesting read. So,
Yeah, there's so much more crossover than I remember because we always talked about guys like Randy Couture was like an alternate and stuff like that, and the UFC never really marketed a lot of these fighters as Olympians. Like Yoel Romero got four or five four title shots, and they never marketed him as like one of the great Olympians of history from Cuba. They were just like, here's a badass fighter. Yeah. But it was very interesting. So check out the MMA Sucka site. We got lots of fighters who competed in the Olympics and crossed over to MMA. What sports? It's a little bit of a hard time zone for you and I to watch. Have there been any sports that you've been watching in the Olympics?
no, I've been keeping tabs on the Taekwondo. I think it's just fallen as I wake up and having my breakfast. It's on the TV then. So obviously we had Jay Jones go out in the first round, which is disappointing. She was going for a third Olympic gold. But yesterday we had Bianca Walkden, who lost in the last second of her semi-final, managed to pick up the bronze in the bronze medal final. So it is what it is. I think Taekwondo is a strange sport. It's almost like a non-contact contact sport. But I've been keeping a little bit of an eye on the boxing, but that's more just like the highlights. It's mostly the combat sports, to be honest. And then obviously you catch it in the swimming and whatnot when it's on, the Adam Peaties of the world. So
Uh,
it's been a good so far. And we're not even a week in yet. So
I think the UK, they had their diver after 13 years finally get a
yeah,
gold
Tom
medal.
Daly, yeah.
That's the name. Thank you so much.
So
Yeah, that was a
yeah,
big deal.
exactly. Yeah, I didn't realize he was so young when I knew he was so young, but I was young at the time as well. He was 14. I think he's 27 now. So it's nice to see him being able to actually sort of, achieve that.
No, and it is. I agree with you on the martial arts and watching their version of Taekwondo. Like I wanted to see some awesome fighting and some awesome martial arts, but it's like the difference between what fencing is and what sword fighting is. Like this is more of a point fighting sport, and you can really see
Exactly.
that. Like it doesn't feel like two people fighting. It does. It just kind of feels like point fighting back and forth. Like I love martial arts, and I don't even really watch it all that much. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, exactly. I think, especially with like the boxing, where it's 3 rounds and it's just scored who they think landed the more effective shots and
Yeah.
whatnot. And with Taekwondo, there's you get I think a point for a punch to the body and maybe 2 or 3 points for a punch. I don't really know the scoring system, but it's very much I'll attack, you attack, I'll attack, you attack, so almost taking turns by what I'm looking at on so far throughout the Olympics so far. But it's you're not getting because the rounds are so short and you don't know who you're going to face. It's very much I'll do my game, you do your game. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of pre-planning. Obviously, you can't pre-plan because you don't know who you're going to come up against. But at the same time, comparing that to MMA, we've got fights booked now for October, November. So you're honing in on your opponent then.
Mm-hmm,
So
mm-hmm.
it's a strange way of putting it. And we've got a piece out on the site as well about whether MMA will ever be an Olympic sport.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd have to reduce the round time. No one wants to sit and watch a 15-minute fight. So maybe it would be similar to the Invicta style, where it's just 1 or 2 rounds of 5 minutes or even 3-minute rounds, which would make it a lot more entertaining. But at the same time, you get a lot more beaten up in an MMA fight than you do in a Taekwondo match, as it were. Do you know what I mean? So, and I think although I think it would be interesting, I'm not sure whether it'll ever actually progress into a sport because there's too many. You can't go through even if it was just 2 rounds, you can't go through a 10-minute war. I mean, look at the state of
Mm-hmm.
TJ Dillashaw this weekend. After 10 minutes, he had the busted knee, the cut on the eyebrow. You couldn't expect him to then 2 days later go into another 10-minute fight and 2 days later go into another 10-minute fight. So whether it'll ever become an Olympic sport, I think it'll be very, very sanctioned if it does. Head guards, knee guards, but We'll have
That
to
was such a
see.
good segue into talking about last week's fight, and I'm not even going to take it because I want to talk about the Olympics a little bit more. So I think it was a really good article written by Andrew on like what the Olympics could potentially look like, or sorry, what mixed martial arts could potentially look like, and I'm in the Olympics. And I remember like 15 years ago we were talking about could MMA ever make it into the Olympics? While like it's very clearly kind of a sport, it has a history with pancration in the Olympics as well. But I remember Jordan Breen of SureDog.com was saying like if you are into mixed martial arts, you would also hate mixed martial arts in the Olympics because it would be not what you want at all, right? Like we kind of like the sport to be a battle of the wills and stuff like that. But if you start wearing shin guards and headgear and whatever else, or even a chest guard, you start feeling like, well, at what point isn't this even mixed martial arts? But I think it
Yeah.
would look a lot more like what the IMMAF does in Europe with amateur mixed martial arts. I think they would probably be the governing body of it as well. 3 3-minute rounds, purely amateurs. They wear shin guards, but no headgear because headgear you can't escape from a choke, so there's no point. It's a detriment.
Exactly.
I think something like that. Yeah, no heel hooks, no twister. You can't knee to the head of a grounded opponent. That's all fair stuff. However, they are adding Muay Thai to the Olympics right now, and if you can allow Muay Thai, I think Muay Thai is just as equally brutal. And I'm not sure if they're
Yeah,
going to
for
allow
sure.
like what is the discussion on knees and elbows? Because like you said, if I
Yeah,
get kneed in the head twice, I probably can't fight in 2 days. Like that's a
exactly.
painful
Yeah.
thing. So I don't know.
Yeah, I didn't know. I didn't know that was they were adding that. To be honest, it's interesting, and I'm not
Kickboxing, Muay
sure.
Thai, and Sambo are received full recognition. It isn't a guarantee of inclusion, it says. So they recognize it as a sport, but it doesn't mean it's going to be in it, I guess.
Yeah, possibly, but I'm not sure whether I'm echoing what you're saying. A big part of Muay Thai is the low leg kick
Yeah.
that debilitates people. We know that from watching MMA every week. You receive even one to the perennial nerve in your leg, and your leg goes completely. Look at Jimmy Crute against Anthony Smith. He couldn't. His leg just simply from the knee down just didn't work. From his brain down to his foot, there was no connection there. So I don't understand how. I think that might be a stumbling block as to how they're going to sanction it, unless they have amateurs, alternates, a lot of protective gear. It's almost, and like you say, it's how many different changes to the sport do you have to make it universally acceptable so people don't think they're watching cage fighting whilst having their breakfast
Yeah.
before it becomes a completely different sport. Like you say, the IMAF is clearly MMA.
Yes.
You can watch that and you're watching MMA.
Yeah.
Yes, they're wearing shin guards, but that is you can still recognize it as MMA. However, if they were to then introduce the chest plate, no ground game, no, maybe even introduce a head guard. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can't do that. It's it waters it down too far, and you're then stepping away from it being a competition to it being more of a point fighting, points based competition, which I don't personally. I'm not sure how interested I'd watch it, but I don't know if I'd be too invested in it.
Yeah, same. And you and I work in the sport, and yeah, it's just a question of what changes would they have, and because you do want it to be appropriate for people who've never seen it before. That might be the first time that someone in Egypt or like Iran or a few other countries have ever seen it. So you do want it to be fairly presentable and fairly clean as they are amateurs. But at what point is it not even the same sport after a while, right? And
Yeah,
that's kind of
exactly.
how I feel like about Taekwondo and stuff like that. However, this week we are doing two things for you folks. So we are the MMASucka crew. My name is Tim Wheaton, joined by editor Frazer Krohn at the MMASucka website. We wanted to do fantasy. We just got off topic. This wasn't even on our list
Yeah,
of talk about things.
yeah.
We wanted to do fantasy matchups for you folks of some fights from history or going on right now that we would have loved to absolutely see. And then we'll break down this weekend's pass card, the UFC in Vegas 32, breaking down the Sandhagen versus Dillashaw and all the undercard on that one as well. So, Frazer, why don't you kick us off? What fantasy matchup do you have for me this week?
This is one I've wrote on the website about before, and I still am fully behind it. I want to see Sean O'Malley face James Gallagher of Bellator.
That is a good one.
Both
That's a good
bantamweights.
pick.
Yeah, exactly. I did think so. both bantamweights, so that works already. I don't want to see Brock Lesnar versus Henry Cejudo. Probably not going to work. But yeah, Gallagher, Sean O'Malley, both trash talkers. Sean O'Malley clearly has the edge in the stand-up, but James Gallagher's not bad standing up. Gallagher has the advantage on the floor, whereas we haven't really seen Sean O'Malley fight on the floor too often, which is, credit to him. He hasn't had to go down there. He hasn't been taken down too often in his career. He hasn't had to resort to that. When he was fighting off his back against Chito Vera, I'm still convinced that he got knocked out cold at one point. You don't put your hands down by your sides and let your head bounce off the floor if you're not out. But he claims that he didn't. It is what it is. But I just think that would be a really interesting matchup in the build up to that as well. In particular, would be very exciting because they both would just go at each other.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree with you. Suga Sean O'Malley just finished fighting that young kid who just came into the UFC, making his UFC debut. He was working at a paint factory just this year. And O'Malley and his coach said that they struggled on two things with this guy. Like he's not an amazing fighter. His head movement wasn't all there. His blocking wasn't all there. His defensive striking wasn't all there. His offensive striking wasn't all there. But he did two things really well that threw off O'Malley, and that he kicked the legs, and then he kept switching stances. So if you get a really good kicker like James Gallagher, he can actually probably do some damage, because Chito Vera's entire plan was to kick out the legs, and it worked. Exactly. So a really good kicker like him, so mixing up with the legs, mixing up to the head, I think that would work extremely well. And it's two good long boys man, how good is bantamweight? This whole division, even Bellator's got some good bantamweight fighters. Holy crap.
From top to bottom in the top 15, we'll go on to talk about the bantamweight division a little more, obviously, in our breakdown of this weekend's card, because there was a couple of banging bantamweight fights on there. But across the sport as a whole, bantamweight is really strong. I think, the PFL could definitely improve on their bantamweight division if I'm not even sure if they've got one, to be honest. But
one of us should
UFC,
know.
Yeah, exactly.
Neither of us do.
Yeah, so that even if they do, it highlights that they haven't got any big players, big names in it. UFC top 10 is one of those where I think anyone would give, whether it's Sterling or Jan, a good battle for the title. You got Rob Font, Cody Garbrandt, etc. So, there's lots of exciting fights at 135, and I think Gallagher versus O'Malley would sort of fit in quite nicely to that.
Man, Gallagher versus O'Malley, I would be all over that fight. That's a fun fight right there. Who would you see winning in this one? What would be if you had to throw money down, who would you be putting money on?
If I had to bet, I'd probably go O'Malley, based on the fact that we haven't seen Gallagher for very often lately. When he fought, obviously, Bandejas, he got pretty brutally knocked out. And then I've seen him, he's good at catching the kicks and taking it to the ground, Gallagher. But with that being said, I think O'Malley's a little bit too wily for that. And I think Gallagher may struggle with the range of O'Malley. O'Malley can keep it long, deny the takedown. And, O'Malley can even kick the leg of Gallagher, if Gallagher comes out in that karate stance. Mm-hmm. But if he gets it to the floor, I think it's Gallagher's realm. So I think I would go O'Malley, but not too confidently.
Yeah. No, I think that's absolutely reasonable. I mean, it's always the X factor with kicking out the legs of him. And yeah, I think that's a great fight there. Are you ready for mine? I got two. I'll give you two this week. One is pretty great, and then the other one is just to alienate any listeners who haven't been watching the sport for 25 years. I'll give you the alienating one. So if you're still listening, you might not be listening in 5 minutes. But Antonio Inoki versus competing at UFC 1. So Antonio Inoki was the Japanese professional wrestler who fought Muhammad Ali in that mixed rules bout, of course. He kicked out the legs of Muhammad Ali. He wasn't allowed to go for takedowns. He wasn't allowed to punch the head of Muhammad Ali. Ali could punch him while standing, but not on the ground. But he still showed, even in a mixed rules bout against a professional boxer, he in a different rule set that allowed for takedowns and stuff like this. They officially fought to a draw, but Antonio Inoki would have won under any modern day rule set. So I think Antonio Inoki in his prime competing at UFC 1, he's a big boy. He's a proper sized heavyweight. I think he
Yeah.
would have won all of UFC 1. I don't think there's a fighter there. Maybe Ken Shamrock. Royce was undersized for the entire competition, but I think Anthony Inoki would have done really well at UFC 1.
Yeah, I think Royce maybe would have, like you say, maybe would have struggled with the size of him. Yes, he couldn't, he might not be able to get his, Inoki uses a smothering game of using his size, utilizing that size. I think Royce maybe, as we've seen in more recent years, jiu-jitsu guys sometimes, when they're the undersized guy, struggle to get their game off against the much bigger guy because they just get smothered and overwhelmed.
Yep.
And I know it's sort of like no rules at UFC 1, but obviously there were rules. And I think Inoki would probably step right on the edge of the rules just to be able to really get his game off. And, if it hit the floor, I don't think he probably would have had the strength to, maybe not great technique, but he would have had the strength to power out of an armbar, a choke, from Royce. So, yeah, that's a really, really interesting.
So for reference, like Royce was a welterweight. He fought Matt Hughes later on with no problem cutting weight or anything like that. And Inoki is probably the same size as Fedor at 6'3", 225 pounds. But it's funny that you say he probably would have cheated at UFC 1. I think his character in Japan for a long time was playing like a dirty heel. I didn't watch it, of course. This was so long ago, but like I think he played a dirty heel who used to cheat during matches. So if he cheated at UFC 1, that would have been well within reason. I think that was his character, right?
I was going to say very on brand for him.
So that was my pick to alienate all the non big boy viewers. If you're still with us, you are a big boy. Welcome to the show. My pick for a number 2 fantasy matchup: Matt Hughes versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. Khabib, I looked it up. He actually has a size advantage going into this fight, but it's just mainly because I was trying to think of a really fun matchup for Khabib that we haven't talked about before. And I always want to see him against a high level D1 wrestler who can really put it on him. And I think Matt Hughes fought with counter wrestling extremely well. He fought guys like Carlos Newton. He fought guys like Matt Serra, some really great fighters that he was able to grapple against and have success. But he was really a top position kind of guy. And if he got to top first, if he pinned Khabib against the cage first, if he was able to muscle Khabib first, it makes for a really interesting matchup that we haven't seen Khabib in that type of scenario. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. I think on the feet, they're both quite raw. They're not Stephen Thompson versus Israel Adesanya. That's not going to be the fight that we're going to get. We're going to get two people essentially butting heads in the middle, using the jab, using the feints to try and get the takedown. And I think they're both such good wrestlers. It could play out on the feet, that one. Do you know what I mean? It's one of those where true. I'll wait for you to shoot and I'll counter your shot, or I'll wait for you to shoot and I'll counter your shot. I think it'd be a really interesting. I like that one as well. It'd be really interesting. And like you said, Matt Hughes has fought Matt Serra, so he can hang with legit black belts on the floor. And we know that Khabib, I don't think Khabib has a black belt in jiu-jitsu, but he is solid on the ground. Probably because he doesn't do a lot of rolling in the gi that he hasn't got his black belt. But if he did, I'm sure that he'd be, he's tapped out many a person. And we've seen him chain submissions together against Gaethje and against, we saw him submit Poirier, submit McGregor with a face crank. So that just goes to show what a squeeze he's got. But with that being said, Matt Hughes can defend against the offensive submissions of Matt Serra. So
yeah, guys like BJ Penn, exactly, Royce Gracie, yeah. Renzo Gracie, or even Ricardo Almeida that I forgot about. But yeah, he's out grappled really good offensive grapplers, right?
Exactly. And I think I didn't realize Khabib would hold a size advantage, but I've always wanted to see Khabib at 170 to see just how he'd fare. He'd maybe the smaller guy as far as reach and height against a lot of the 170 pounders. But so, I mean, if you have seen any recent pictures of him now, he's a big guy. He's walking around at middleweight. He's struggling to make 170 at the moment. So I'd be interested to see him actually compete at 170 and see how he sort of holds up against the top players of the 170 division. And he still could, obviously he's retired now, but he's not old. He's 30, maybe 31.
Yeah, he's pretty young.
Still young. So
Did you see my I don't know. By the time this goes up, I think I'll have another article up of Habib started 3 companies in the last like 4 months or something like that. Did you see this one?
I
He's
haven't
keep
seen it yet. No, I'll get
he's
onto it.
keeping busy in retirement. So he started a water and a protein bar company, which are par for the course. Those are both on brand. But he also opened a cell phone network in Moscow. So you can buy it's called, I think it's Eagle Mobile by Habib is the official name. And his water company is called Water by Habib. So
Wow,
he's
very on
keeping busy
brand.
in
I
retirement.
was gonna say.
It's a great name.
Yeah, I mean, it's not the most inventive name, I'll be honest, but it's keeping his brand out there for people. So
So I picked Habib versus Matt Hughes as my fantasy matchup, and Anthony Inoki competing at UFC 1 as my other fantasy matchup. So that's a fun week. So UFC on Vegas 32. Do you want to run down the prelim card, and then we can talk about the main event, and then we can talk about the bantamweight title picture? Because I'm excited for that one.
yeah, for sure. So I thought, this card on paper was stacked anyway, and we could talk in detail about pretty much every fight. But I thought I'd just go through to quick 1 or 2 lines on every fight going through, just to sort of get through the whole card. Because I realized that when we did the McGregor breakdown a few weeks ago, which is still up on the site if you want to check that out, we only spoke about the McGregor fight, and there's plenty more on that card that we didn't touch on. So just going through the fight, going through the card, just quick line or 2 on every fight, and just see, just to give you guys a bit of, our thoughts on it. So starting off, opening the event, we had Hannah Goldie versus Diana Belbita. Hannah Goldie has no head movement, and it made Belbita's game very easy. She rocked Goldie a lot, and there's an interview with Goldie up on the YouTube channel as well, so go and check that out. That's very interesting by James Lynch. But Diana Belbita hasn't shown much in the UFC yet, but she looks like a brand new contender at 115. She looked good. Yes, if the fight was maybe 30 seconds longer, Goldie may have got the finish, but that's just, I think, maybe a little bit of naivety from Belbita, not being able to finish the fight off as strong as she started it, because she almost finished Goldie in the first, or I can't remember if it's first or second round. She rocked her bad.
117,
moving on, we've got
117 significant strikes landed for Deanna. It scored a knockdown, and this is only a 3-round fight. For reference, TJ Dillashaw only landed 110 strikes in 5 rounds, and she was landing 117 in 3 rounds. So yes,
I think that says more about the head movement of Goldie. Belbita's not she's not known as the best striker at 115, but I think that says more about Goldie than it does about Belbita. And I think Goldie will come again. Her first fight in the UFC was against, I think it was Miranda Granger, and that was very much a coming out party for Miranda Granger. She then had a lot of fights cancelled. She hasn't fought in a long time, so it was a bit of ring rust. I think she'll maybe get one more. If she loses that, maybe she'll get cut, but she's marketable as well.
There it is. That's Hannah Goldie right there. She's marketable.
Exactly. She's marketable. She's crossing over into that OnlyFans realm that I didn't know about. I only learned in the interview with on the site. So it's she's not a bad fighter at all, but I just think I know she trains with Gillian Robertson. I think a little more, maybe even a bigger team, but and also she's ripped. She is strong. She is big for the weight class. So she's an interesting fighter, but I think this one just got away from her, I think. But it's the same. I've just written about the Eubanks fight. The experienced bantamweight beat the inexperienced strawweight. That's Elise Reed was 4-0, and Eubanks, he's gone through tough, was potentially in a title picture back in the day, has fought some big names, fought Aspen Ladd, has fought up at bantamweight, and she gets her first finish in the UFC. And yes, it's a good finish, dominated the fight, but what do people expect, that the 4-0 strawweight would come in and be able to dominate the strong black belt who is a bantamweight, just cuts down to flyweight? And then she called out, I think, Jessica Eye, maybe. Oh no, sorry, that was Macy Barber. But she called for a bigger fight. So of course you're going to get a bigger fight, because this girl is coming into the UFC to fight you on late notice. But I just think, that is what it is. I struggle to get on board with Sajara Eubanks purely because I like her fighting style. I think she's good on the ground, but I just can't see where she's going to be one of these that wins 2 and then loses, and then wins 2 and then loses, and it's constantly taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, and then she might lose 2 and win 3, and it's she's going to trade wins and losses until, you know, the frustrating thing is she's teammates with Caitlin Chikagian, but I think that would be a really good fight, but it's never gonna materialize.
Oh yeah, she's an official UFC title holder. She's in the annals forever as a UFC title holder, isn't she? Or am I thinking of somebody else? Like,
No,
she was
that's Nico Montano, I think.
That's who I'm thinking of. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. And who fights this weekend? And I think that's all you need to know about this weekend's card. But
I got the two of them mixed up. I'm sorry, Eubanks.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, I think they were both on tough, weren't they? And
that's what I thought.
But I mean, that's all you need to know. She lost out to, you know, Nico Montano went further in tough than she did. And I think we've seen Montano twice in the UFC or once in the UFC in 4 years, maybe. So yeah, it's what it is. And then, you know, going on, we had Andre Ewell versus Julio Arce. New contender at 135 pounds for Arce. I think he was absolutely quality. The stoppage was contested a little bit, but at the same time, you can't take that many unanswered shots without giving anything back and then argue the stoppage. It was similar to in boxing, the Joe Joyce versus Carlos Takam fight this weekend. Takam was just receiving just strikes to the head without throwing anything back, and you can't just throw one big overhand right that was never going to land and expect to stay in the fight. That's what Takam did, and Andre Ewell didn't even do that. He just covered up, and there was a little bit, you know, he could have let it go 2 or 3 more seconds, but, you know, 2 or 3 more strikes could have knocked Ewell out cold. He got stopped standing, and I think I was completely fine with the stoppage. I think it was, you know, if he would have let it go any further, you maybe get a brutal knockout and you know, a heavier suspension. So I don't have a problem with the stoppage at all. I didn't realize that was Arce's first win at bantamweight for a good few years. So you know, I'm pleased for him because he did look good as well. His whole game seemed, you know, he was landed on Ewell at will. Ewell's not the easiest guy to land on. You know, he's fairly experienced. So thought it was a really good performance.
Bantamweight, right? It's just such a good division.
Exactly, I know. That's what I'm saying. Another bantamweight. We've got this bantamweight fight. We've got another one that we'll talk about, Yanez Costa. And obviously, we'll go deeper on the main event, but it's a crazy deep division. And then the last 3 fights on the prelims, I didn't realize Mickey Gall had so many submissions at 170. I think he's the 3rd highest ever in submissions, behind Damian Maia and somebody else. I can't remember off the top of my head, but
because I don't imagine him fighting in the UFC for a very long time. How many submissions do you need at welterweight to be? Exactly.
I think he's got six submissions. I think he's got now. But what I really liked about Mickey Gall is I think he had a guillotine, and he gave up the guillotine. It was position over submission. He had the guillotine. He gave up on the guillotine, maintained his dominant position. Within 20 seconds, he had the rear naked choke victory. So that just proves, you know, he was so confident in his ground game that he didn't have to hold on to the guillotine for his life, burn out his arms, because he didn't. And, you know, Williams was, you know, it was deep, but he wasn't in great trouble, I don't believe. And Gall obviously knew that. He was experienced enough to know that, gave up on the submission, prioritized his position over Williams, and then managed to get the rear naked choke. I thought it was a really, really good submission. And he looked all right in the stand-up. Mickey Gall, he rocked Williams. I think he dropped Williams, actually, with a big knee, or rocked him at least. But again, he's one of these where, you know, he lost to Mike Perry quite convincingly. He lost to Diego Sanchez quite convincingly. Where does he go? You know, he's got the wins over, you know, the CM Punks, the Mike Jacksons, the Sage Northcotts of this world. But yeah, I mean, his resume on paper isn't great. Where does he go from here? You know, is he ever going to be a top 15 guy? Probably not, because welterweight is quite, you know, if you're looking at the top 15 of welterweight, it's quite strong. So,
Well, for our
and
faith, I don't think any of us on the MMASucka staff picks. 6 out of 13 people picked Williams, which is a very like showing that most people don't have a huge amount of faith in the future of Gall's
exactly,
career.
and he's clearly not a huge name after Ladd and Macy Cheerson fell off. He was also cut from the main card and put on the prelims. So they clearly don't have a lot of faith in him to, compete on the main card. So, and it kind of shows, he's not awfully marketable. He's got a kind of personality that I struggle to like. I think he's a brilliant fighter, but he just comes across as a little bit arrogant, but his game doesn't back that up. He lost to Mike Perry convincingly when Mike Perry was going through his Mike Perry stage. So I think that says quite a lot. Ian Heinisch, he suffered his first ever TKO loss, but I didn't realize he's 1-4 in his last 5 fights. I don't really know.
He's like a gatekeeper, but he's good enough to like frustrate guys like Gastelum and Brunson and like get a decision. But I wouldn't say he's a world beater kind of fighter. Yeah.
No, I don't know why, but I always pictured him to be on the cusp of a top 10, but just because of the name, he fought Gastelum, like you say, he fought Brunson, and these are good guys, and they didn't completely dominate him to the point where, they didn't 30-26, and they won the fights, but I didn't really, 1-4 in his last 5 fights.
It's not great.
I'm not sure if he's got an awful lot more to give the middleweight division, in a division where you've got guys coming up as well. You've got I know Hamzat's going back down to welterweight, but you've got your Hamzats on the edge of who could compete at middleweight.
Oh yeah.
You've got a stacked middleweight division. You've got your Costas, your Adesanyas, Whitakers, Tills now, Brunson, Shabazian, Jack Hermanson. So I struggle to see where he fits into that. If you can't beat Gastelum, who, yes, he gave Adesanya a good fight, but realistically, Gastelum's not a top 10, not a top 5 guy. I don't really know where Heinisch goes from here.
No, totally agree. Yeah.
And then obviously headlining the prelims, we had Soriano versus Allen. Allen's body kicks were making me winded, and I was watching it on replay. They were savage, and I think Soriano's 2 previous fights, first round KOs, didn't do him any favors, because he puts 100% into every punch that he throws, which makes for a really exciting style. But he gassed out in the second round. He was tired. Where that was from, but that was, I think, from the body kicks of Allen, but also from the fact that he's just absolutely swinging with every shot. With that being said, Brendan Allen, great performance, but on his post-fight interview, he needs to let the Sean Strickland fight go. He lost to Sean Strickland. He beat Carl Roberson, called Sean Strickland out, nothing. He beats Soriano, calls Sean, let it go. If you put a few more fights together and Strickland loses this weekend, it's not, with the greatest respect, they're not big enough names to build a rematch around. Get some more wins, let Strickland get some more wins or losses. And then, if Strickland goes on a 1 or 2 fight losing streak, you're on a 3 or 4 fight losing streak. You've got the power in that situation to call out the guy on the losing streak. To let that fight go. You lost the fight by TKO or KO, I can't remember off the top of my head, but you definitely lost it by finish. For Sean Strickland, if he beats Uriah Hall now, he's top 8, top 7. A fight against Brendan Allen, if he wins, doesn't do anything for him. Brendan Allen's never going to get that fight. So it's just, put some wins together, dominate your opponents like you've been doing. Carl Roberson dominated. I think it was a heel hook finish. Soriano this time, pretty well dominated. Never looked in great danger. So put some more wins together like this, where you're completely outputting your opponents, and then the Strickland fight will come. It will sort of materialize naturally.
Or
He's
aim
not going to be
higher.
able.
Aim
Exactly,
higher.
yeah, exactly. You know, say I want the winner of this weekend's fight, whether it's Hall or Strickland.
Sure.
Best case scenario for him, Strickland wins and he gets a Strickland rematch. Worst case scenario, he gets Uriah Hall, who's a fairly big name, you know, a tough winner, beat former champions, Anderson Silva, obviously Chris Weidman with the leg break, but it's, you know, like you say, aim higher, you know.
Yeah.
Might break into the top 15 with this win.
Sure.
But again, you know, does that offer Sean Strickland anything if he wins this fight this weekend? No, it doesn't. So either let it go or put some more wins together and put yourself in a position where Strickland wants to fight you rather than you wanting to fight Strickland.
Yeah, that's totally reasonable. I co-sign. If you're going to call someone out, call someone out. But this just isn't worth it. It's too low.
Exactly. Yeah, going forward, the Yanez Costa fight again at bantamweight. Two likable guys going at one another, and Costa was jabbing the absolute head off Yanez, and Yanez has got serious game to be able to get through that. You know, it's jabs aren't the most damaging strike in MMA, but at the same time, it's frustrating. You know, you're trying to get your game going and you get jabbed in the face. You're trying to get your game going, you get jabbed in the face. The finish came obviously in the second. He just weathered the storm, and I think he just broke Costa's will a bit because, you know, the finish came sort of tap 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 body shot, tap 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 body shot, tap 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 body shot, and you know Costa just couldn't handle it. And post fight, I thought it was brilliant. You know, Costa, I'm happy for you. You know, we'll maybe meet again. I'll be watching your career. That is what Conor McGregor should have done, to be honest. And that's what I really like. You know, two guys friendly before. I don't even mind, you know, a bit of bad blood between two people, but as long as after the fight they go to war. Costa clearly wins the first round 10-9. Second round, Yanez comes out, new fighter almost, breaks Costa. After the fight, you know, maybe we'll fight again. I can see them maybe even training together. I don't know where they're both situated, but I can see them training together in the future. Just two likable guys. You know, they interact. Yanez interacts with MMA Twitter often online. So, you know, he gets it. Yanez gets it. And I think he deserves the top 15 guy next, you know. I think against a fight against Marlon Vera would be a banger, you know.
That'd be a good one. Yeah, Yanez right now undefeated in the UFC. All four were wins by TKO. This guy's serious. This guy is a one to absolutely keep your eye on. And I agree with you. Once you beat somebody, probably build that person up because it actually makes you look better if you build up some guy you just beat up, right? If you beat up a scrub, who cares? If you beat up a king, that's a big deal. So yeah, Yanez is definitely one to watch for.
For sure. And like you say, he's got 4 wins all by TKO. Comparing that to a bigger star name-wise in O'Malley, you know, yes, he gets the viral knockouts of Eddie Wineland and co, but he struggled against Matinho. Yes, he dominated him, but he struggled to get the fight finished. He lost against Chito Vera. He knocked out Eddie Wineland, and did anyone really expect Eddie Wineland to beat him? Not really.
Nope.
And he also had the fight against Henry Quinones, not Henry Quinones, okay, Jose Quinones, who got caught in the headlights. So, you know, Yanez is becoming as big a star, I think, slowly but surely, as Sean O'Malley. I can see that being a great fight because O'Malley struggled with Matinho, who was in his face.
Yep. And
Yanez will be there all night.
Yep, absolutely.
The Barber Maverick fight, I just can't understand how Macy Barber came away with the decision, to be honest. Miranda Maverick won the fight. She won the first round. I think Barber I wrote an article about it, so go and check that out. But I think Barber threw 7 strikes in the first round. Landed 7 strikes in the first round. I'm not an MMA fighter. I would be confident on being able to at least land more than 7 strikes in 5 minutes. Even if it's just a low calf kick, really keeping myself out of the way, a low calf kick. She's got a problem with distance control, Macy Barber. We saw it against Alexa Grosso, where she's just throwing strikes, but never, and they're not faint, and they're not sort of strikes that she knows aren't gonna. She's throwing strikes that are not even close to Alexa Grasso. So Grasso doesn't, you know, when you see Thompson throw a strike, he'll throw it close enough so that he gets the reaction out of his opponent, and he knows, he sort of computes that reaction, right? If I throw this kick, he's bringing his hand up here, but he's leaving his ribs. Or if I throw this punch, he's blocking it and looking to counter with the left, so I can counter over the top. Barber's throwing strikes out of range of Alexa Grasso, so that Grasso's not having to react to, you know, try and throw her feints, because Alexa Grasso knows that she's too far away to counter that strike. So she just, you know, maybe takes not even half a step back. She can just move from her hips, just move her head backwards, and it's never going to land. I think that's what we saw against Miranda Maverick. Mm-hmm. The second round is a contentious one where Maverick had, I think, over a minute and a half control time. She landed the takedown on Barber, and as the round finished, she had her back. Now, that's her looking to finish the fight. She's in the dominant position. She's doing more damage. Yes, Barber landed some elbows in the clinch, I think, but Maverick was dominating the end of that round, and she didn't do too badly in the whole round, the round as a whole. Now, I cannot understand how the two judges have given that to Barber. Yes, she landed some good strikes, but the first thing they should be looking at is damage, durability, and then maybe distance control. Sorry, duration and durability. So how long a period Barber was dominating the fight of the round in comparison to Miranda Maverick. With that being said, I think Maverick is a 2-round fighter. We've seen her in her past 2 fights against Gillian Robertson and against Macy Barber dominate the first 2 rounds. Maybe not so much second round against Barber, but she definitely won the round. But she's handily lost the last round in each of her 2 fights. So it's clearly a cardio issue. And she's jacked. She's a big girl. So maybe the weight cut's getting to her a little bit. So maybe she needs to sort that out. But she's still young. So she could sort that out without a problem, I believe. But it's just either lowering her output in the first and second round, because she didn't need to put that much of a beating on Barber in the first round because there was nothing coming back. So say if you know your cardio is going to be an issue, save a little bit from the first round. She'd won the first round without a doubt. Barber didn't throw. She landed 7 strikes. So maybe reduce your output ever so slightly, just so that, you know, in the third round, you're not handily dominated. But with that being said, I think Barber, like I say, needed the win. But she obviously used it. I don't think she trains with Duke Rufus anymore, but comparing her quite well, I was thinking last night to Tyron Woodley, where the output isn't there, but she looks to blitz and then maybe clinch. Maybe that's something that Duke Rufus has taught them both to do. But the blitz from Woodley, as we've seen time and again, jab straight, jab, but he's got the power to knock his opponent dead. Barber doesn't do that. So why they're both being taught the same thing, to step back on the fence, blitz, I'm not really sure why Barber's being taught the same thing as Woodley if she doesn't have, you know, I think she knocked out Hannah Cyphers, or finished Hannah Cyphers, finished Gillian Robertson I think they were their first 2 bouts. Now that again, maybe like Soriano, maybe did a little bit of a detriment because she believes too much in her power now, thinking I can go in there and if I land on these girls, they'll struggle. That's fair. Roxanne Modafferi didn't, you know, she had the knee injury, but she was handily dominated by Modafferi. Alexa Grasso, far too smart to just be caught by a big shot.
Absolutely. She's a good one.
Slick boxing. So, you know, going forward, I think Barber, she's still young, but she needs to work on ramping it up in the first round, because that first round on Saturday, she didn't. If it would have gone like that, she'd be 0-3 in her last 3. But it is. I agree with you. Yeah,
especially in this weight class, if you're rushing for the takedown, if you're rushing for a knockout, you're probably not going to get it. Just be a patient, smart striker and mix in body shots. But no, she's just a headhunter. She's fighting Chuck Liddell style. She's just looking for a big knockout.
Exactly. You know, if you compare that to the champion Valentina, when's the last time we saw Valentina swing with everything that she's got, trying to look for the knockout? Against Jessica Eye, the first round, she worked the body kicks. she took her down and dominated her on the floor. The second round, she worked the body kicks. Then she went upstairs. The opportunity arose. She's working the body, bang, huge head kick, out cold. She's not forcing that. She's setting it up. First round, a couple of body kicks. Get Jessica thinking about the body kick. Oh no, now I'll take you down. Second round, remember the body kick from the first round. Remember the body kick from the first round. I'm coming up to, okay, I've knocked you out.
Beautiful.
It's not. That's a well-rounded game. She set it up in the first. She sort of she reminded Jessica in the second and finished it in the second. But if that fight goes on, Jessica manages, which I think she hoped she would have, to get her arm up at least to block it. She's also then thinking about the takedown because she got dominated on the first round on the takedown. So, do I drop my hands to defend the takedown, or do I cover my head up to defend the high kick? So,
yeah, you're just saying things.
Valentine.
You're just saying be a complete fighter. That's our advice to her.
Exactly. And then going forward, Darren Elkins can't continue to fight like this. Dominated in the fight, and then tires his opponent out by just being a human punch bag and finishes it. I think all I've got to say on that fight, I really don't understand his fighting style of just, I'm going to receive as much damage as possible and hope that my opponent tires out. I think Minna is going to be frustrated in himself because I think you've got to go into a fight with Darren Elkins assuming that you're going to dominate him for 15 minutes and not try and finish the fight. Not force to finish, I should say, because we've seen Mercer Bektik do it, and now we've seen Darren Minna do it, where they're going in, they're landing on Elkins regularly, and they're just tiring themselves out. And I think he's going to be frustrated in himself because he would have known, the guy's got the damage tattooed on his chest. They're going to have known that he's durable and that he takes damage and can still keep on going. Now, if you just pop a jab in his face for 15 minutes, I don't mean to be disrespectful to Elkins, but I don't think he's good enough to. I think Minna's the better fighter, but he just got really, really tired. And now I think Minna's going to be frustrated in himself, like I say, because we know that Darren Elkins takes damage for like it's nothing. So why try and go out there and just finish it in the first round?
Totally.
But, it is what it is. I think as well, just going into the co-main event, then we'll go on to the main event. I scored it a draw. I thought the first round was a 10-8, and I think it's about as 10-8 as you can pretty much get. He dropped him. He barely landed. Piver barely landed on Phillips. It was scored a 10-9, and then obviously I don't think Phillips respected Piver after rocking him in the first round. But Piver did really well to recover in the second and third round to obviously get the victory in a 2-1 rounds. But I do think, I scored it a 10-8. Purely the domination of the first. I don't think we get enough 10-8 rounds.
I agree.
And I think it should have been 10-8 in the first, and then I agree, Piver win the second and third. So you're looking at a draw overall. But I think Phillips would be frustrated because the win wouldn't have done too much for him because Piver was coming up from flyweight. I did see Piver got taken out of the flyweight rankings, but not put into the bantamweight rankings, which I'm confused about. He gets taken out of the flyweight rankings despite coming off a victory. We don't know whether he's going to go back down to flyweight or stick around at bantamweight. But why take him out of the rank? I think the rankings are a mess, but it is what it is.
Yeah, a weird situation there, and a co-main event
for
fight.
Another day.
Yeah, the UFC proper rankings thing. Yeah, I can't help you with that one. That's a weird one. Exactly. That one's out there.
And then obviously we'll go into the main event. Who did you score it for, the main event?
Well, so I did a couple different scoring types. And if I'm doing just like a regular, this is how they do it in Nevada, this 9-10s, I still had Sandhagen winning because I've had him in 3 rounds. The 5th is really the split round from what I've seen from other people. And I think that's okay. If you scored the 5th round for Dillashaw, I don't mind. He was controlling in the clinch. I don't think he was scoring damage in the clinch. I think the more effective strikes in round 5 was Sandhagen. If I did a little bit more of a loose scoring system, like honestly, round 2 could have been a 10-8 for Sandhagen, and then round 3 could have been a 10-10 And that still ends up with Sandhagen winning. And then if we do a one championship or pride rules of just who was more effective overall, not looking round by round, I still would have picked Sandhagen overall. So if you're doing round by round, if you pick Dillashaw, I'm not going to argue with you. That's a fine pick. This is not a robbery by any means. It is an extremely close fight, but I think overall, Sandhagen probably came out with a better stock, better race stock. How did you score the fight? Who did you see winning?
Yeah, so I'm exactly the same as you, scoring it as we know that they'll score it in Nevada. I had 3-2 Sandhagen. I think second, fourth, and fifth, I think were all Sandhagen's rounds.
2-4-5,
yeah. Yeah. Second round, I agree. I think Dillashaw just did enough so that it's not a 10-8. But
he got dropped, but he was throwing punches back in the last 10 seconds or so. But he was getting killed that round.
But even the first round, I think, is contentious.
Yep.
Dillashaw dominated the round per se, but it's not like Sandhagen was completely out of it. And Sandhagen did enough to, for me, at least put a question mark on the round with the attack in the leg at the end. He was the one looking to cause damage and looking to end the fight with the heel hook, and
that's true.
I think that round is maybe not as contentious as the fifth, but certainly there has to be a question about the first round. I think there's more of an argument for Sandhagen winning more rounds than there is for Dillashaw winning more rounds.
That's actually true. So the two rounds that we definitely agreed Dillashaw won would have been 3-1, but those rounds were extremely close. If someone else said, well, Sandhagen did X, Y, and Z, that's fine. Or even if you said, no, I think both 1 and 3 are a 10-10, that's fine. So the rounds that Sandhagen definitely won, he dominated. 2 and 4 were not particularly close rounds, but yet 1 and 3 for Dillashaw were extremely close rounds, right?
Exactly, yeah. I don't think you can make an argument that Dillashaw won rounds 2 and 4 at all. And if you do, I don't think you know anything about the scoring system, because
that's correct.
The cut alone, I think would have won, and dropping Dillashaw would have won Sandhagen that round. I can't see anybody. I've listened to 4 or 5 podcasts on it. I've watched a couple of breakdowns on it. I've watched the fight twice myself. There's nothing in the second or fourth round that tell me that Dillashaw could have even got a 10-10 in those rounds. He got dominated truly in those 2 rounds. Like you say, the first and the third, there's elements in both of those rounds, less so the third, but definitely the first, where I could say I can understand if Sandhagen gets that round. That's not a bad call if Sandhagen wins that round.
Not terrible, no.
Exactly. And then the fifth is the contentious one. But I think the thing is, I think a lot of what I've seen is people giving TJ props for, and they were doing it on the broadcast as well, DC and Dominic Cruz, giving TJ props for the takedown or the clinch situation that he got Sandhagen into multiple times when he sort of got his back in the clinch. Personally, I'm not, and I've read the unified rules. I'm not scoring that as something that TJ's done well, purely because he hasn't done anything with it. That hasn't, on the most part, I know he took Sandhagen down a couple of times, but that hasn't led directly. That's not a takedown because they're both still on their feet. He hasn't forced that position. He's capitalized on a mistake from Sandhagen, who's turned his back and he's sort of almost chasing him down. And he's not using that position to, the knees to the thigh are probably affecting Sandhagen somewhat, but they're not damaging strikes to end the fight. No one's ever been, and no fight has ever been ended from knees to the thigh. So personally, I don't see how that is scored in favor. Obviously, the position, but I can't see how that's scored in favor of. I think that's a null point, because Sandhagen puts himself in that position and Dillashaw puts himself on the back of Sandhagen but doesn't do anything with it. It's more of that he's stalling that part of the round for me.
It's tough to officially. So they clarified the rules, like I think in 2017 was when they did the big clarifications, and they said impact is number one. So making an impact, you measure impact first. And then you look at other stuff like control. And so, like, TJ did have more control technically. He imposed his will technically. And that's why we look at it and say, well, if you scored it for TJ, that's reasonable. But he didn't have much impact in any of those positions. He wasn't scoring anything in those positions, but he still held control. And honestly, it's not just this fight. MMA is a weird fight to score, or a weird sport to score for these reasons. Do you look at a guy who imposed his will for, maybe the majority of the round, or the guy who landed more punches but wasn't able to get out from a clinch position? And I mean, you and I would say, well, we look at impact, but if someone else said, no, we look at control. Okay, that's fair. Like, I'm not even
Exactly,
against
yeah.
that. That's not the stupidest thing I've ever heard. However, based on how I look at fights and how I think fights should be judged and the way I understand the rules, I think impact is number one. Yeah.
Yeah, and like the damage aspect of the fight, who's
Mhm.
caused more damage and looked for the finish.
Yeah. No, I totally
Everyone
co-sign
says
with you.
keep the judges out of it. Sandhagen was looking to keep the judges out of it. The knees,
Mhm.
the submission attempt in the first, constantly landing on Dillashaw, dropping Dillashaw. At no point did I ever think that Dillashaw was going to finish Sandhagen.
Yeah.
But there was a couple of times where I thought, oh, maybe if Dillashaw doesn't get out of this knee bar, if Sandhagen jumps on Dillashaw following the knockdown, the cut could have even stopped it, because it's obviously north to south in a bad position above the eye.
A different athletic commission absolutely would have stopped that bout. If this was like a more
100%, in New
conservative,
York.
that's what I was going to say. New York would have
Yeah,
stopped that.
yeah.
Absolutely.
I think the cut was, you're looking at maybe as bad as Nate Diaz's against Jorge Masvidal, but
I think
he
it's in a worse
probably
spot
in a
too.
worse
That's
position. Yeah, exactly. At least with Diaz, he had some, he could pour it out of the eye and sort of almost, take it away from his vision. Whereas TJ, he can't sort of go one way or the other. He's just got to sort of just try and clear his eye as much as possible. I listened to Brendan Schaub's podcast, which, whatever your opinion is on Brendan Schaub, but he was saying that when you get a blood in the eye, it's like oil. Obviously, luckily, thankfully, I've never had to deal with that. But he's like, it's like oil. You can't, once you pour it away, it's still affecting your vision. You can get it out of your eye, but there's still almost like a film over your eye. So, fair play to Dillashaw for fighting through that. But the cut was, again, going back to the point that we were making before, that's a damaging strike. And it wasn't like a Jessica I, Jennifer Meyer clash of heads. That was from a Sandhagen punch. He caused the cut. And I think that should be scored a much, much more higher than Dillashaw just taking the back, stood up of Sandhagen after being presented with the back,
Yeah, he had some control, but he also, like you said, the cut was definitely a factor, and it was a gnarly cut. And like, if they stopped it, I wouldn't have minded that one bit. But yeah, I guess that Dillashaw never advanced any. He never advanced any advantageous positions where he was in control. But overall, what a great fight! Because so many times we talk about these classic
Definitely.
fights in history where they're just kind of like bar brawls. We're talking about Wanderlei Silva and Brian Stan, and that's a great fight. But this is like a very technical, very good fight back and forth where I think both of them threw the other guy off by just switching stances. So one guy switched stance and the other guy switched stance and the other guy switched, because then they couldn't set stuff up in the same way where if I switch stance, I know you're still in the same stance forever. You're not changing stances. So it ended up being a really interesting fight where both guys, you couldn't quite get anything perfectly off, couldn't quite get either of their games going. They're really well matched for each other. This was a great fight overall, right?
Yeah, for sure. And I think if you were just to listen to your breakdown without watching the fight, you could even think, it's quite a boring fight because one switching stance and then the other one's trying to work out what he's going to do. So he switches stance, and it could have been quite standoffish, quite a chess match where they're trying to figure each other out. And it's quite a slow paced fight because, like you say, Dillashaw stood in orthodox, then maybe squares up for a second, shoots for, dummy in the takedown, then goes back to orthodox, but then throws a punch and steps through into southpaw. At the same time, Sandhagen's utilizing the knee, stands in orthodox, but then he switches on the defensive into south. So on paper, it could have been quite a boring fight, almost two people, like two magnets, never quite engaging, because as soon as one goes forward, the other switches, and vice versa. But like you say, I think it's a great matchup. But I think a point I really wanted to make is I just disagreed with the UFC's promotion of this fight. They're promoting it like Dillashaw was injured and it's coming back and a big redemption story. The guy is a cheat. He took EPO. It's not a tainted. It's not a Yoel Romero tainted supplement. It's not a Nick Diaz smoked marijuana and got banned. The guy, you can't unintentionally take EPO. He intentionally cheated to load his gloves, as it were, to try and beat Henry Cejudo and lost. And yes, he came out and admitted it and said, I took this. I shouldn't have. I'll take my ban. Do you think if he wouldn't have got caught, he would have came out and said, I took EPO? Absolutely not. He's only admitting it because he got caught. And I just really, and I put a tweet out because I was just frustrated because, I'm not mad that he won the fight. I think, like you said, I think Sandhagen deserved to win the fight. I think Dillashaw deserved to win the fight. The decision is what it is. But he comes on the mic, Daddy's home, blah, blah, blah. Daddy's a cheat. You cheat. The reason that you're out of the rankings, the reason you lost the bout is because you cheated. I just cannot get on board with everyone saying like, it's such a great redemption story, this, that, and the other. Yes, he looked good after 2 years out, but he intentionally cheated. And like I say, it's not a tainted supplement where Yoel Romero, there's questions about Yoel Romero because I don't know, I can't remember what it is, but he had a protein powder that had something tainted in it, or Canelo with the tainted Mexican meat. TJ Dillashaw injected himself to try and make his game better. And now the UFC is saying, oh, it's this great redemption story. He's been out for 2 years. Look how good he looks after 2 years. Yes, he did look good after 2 years. But the reason that he was out for 2 years is because he cheated.
Yeah.
I still can't get on board with. And I tweeted, it's frustrating that he hasn't come back from an injury. He hasn't just been sat on the. Leon Edwards didn't get this when he was sat on the sidelines for a year and a half, and he didn't cheat. He was just sat on the sidelines, not getting matchups, turning down matchups. Yes, he turned down matchups, but he didn't cheat. At no point did he.
He couldn't fly out of the country. He wasn't allowed to go anywhere. Yeah, it wasn't his choice.
And they don't give him this platform, and people say, "Oh, well, Leon Edwards isn't very marketable." You're not helping yourselves by marketing people like McGregor with the dolly throwing incident. And I'm sure the next time McGregor fights, they'll have him sat in the ring, especially if he fights Poirier next. They'll have him sat in the ring talking to Joe Rogan.
Absolutely, 100%.
And this redemption story of TJ Dillashaw, they're really leaning on that, and it's his fault that he's been out for 2 years. And they were 2 of his prime years. He was champion at the time. He was going for double champ status, and it's his fault. No one, it's not a Chris Weidman out for 2 years because he broke his leg. It's I injected EPO, so I'm out for 2 years.
Yeah.
And I just can't, and I can't. And I was a little bit frustrated. I just tweeted, look, this is pretty much what I've just said there is, and someone came back with, he still won. Well, yes, he did still win. But it doesn't take away the fact that he cheated. Like he didn't cheat in this fight, no. But it does not take away the fact that his legacy will always be tarnished with former 2-time bantamweight champion, banned for 2 years for intentionally injecting EPO. In my opinion, I just can't look past that.
Absolutely. And I think the point that you're really hammering home is how weird it was that the UFC put up promos, multiple promos. They did a show on TJ Dillashaw. I think it's like a 30-minute program about how, like, man, TJ is really the victim here, isn't he? Like, what? He is the sympathetic character here, isn't he? Wow. How brave of TJ Dillashaw to blah, blah, blah. I think it's a weird thing to like, why? Just be like, he's a former champ and he got busted cheating and now he's back. This is, like, it's a weird thing to be like, he's such a victim. He had a tough break and he did all he could to win. He's a victim of winning. Like, man, shut up. Like, this is stupid.
Exactly.
And like you said, EPO, Jeff Novinsky said, like, you can't accidentally do EPO. You have to know what you're doing to do this one.
Exactly. And, if comparing that to, the legend is TRT Vitor. TRT was legal at the time, I believe.
It was legal at the time. Yes, absolutely.
Exactly. But if Dillashaw would have absolutely dominated Henry Cejudo over 25 minutes, would we be bigging it up as, oh, look at EPO Dillashaw? Probably not, because it's an illegal substance. You can't. Belfort fought within the rules and was a beast in that time.
Yep.
You just need to look at him to see that alone. But he, we can't say that he cheated because that was in the rules at the time. If he did it now, that's cheating because it's now against the rules. Likewise, if in it won't ever, but in 30 years' time, if EPO is legal, we won't be saying, oh well, yeah, TJ didn't cheat. He cheated at the time because it was a banned substance.
Right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Do you see what I mean? So, and it's not like it's not like it's appropriate to the time. And like you say, they did a big 30-minute. I didn't see an awful lot on Sandhagen, who didn't take any performance enhancing drugs. Is a pretty stand-up guy, doesn't go on Twitter like McGregor and go off on people like that. And yet he's not getting really the airtime that his skill set and his personality deserve. But because TJ, the former champion, was banned for intentionally taking EPO, and like you say, it's almost like he's the victim. He's not the victim at all. He cheated.
Yeah,
they're the facts. The facts are that he won the fight. Yes. The fact is also he cheated previously. You put them two together, and for me, it muddies the waters. But it is what it is.
It's a weird thing that the UFC, some of the decisions that they make are questionable in terms of marketing. Like we talked about this TJ Dillashaw against Cory Sandhagen, you really put the hard sell on a former champion who was suspended due to EPO, something you definitely can't screw up. And if you watch his fighting, aware of the effects of EPO, that it helps you more in cardio than anything else, you kind of think this guy's probably been on EPO for most of his career. It's the way that he fought. He was an amazing 4th and 5th round fighter, and he was outpacing other people. But why wouldn't you be giving the hard sell to Cory Sandhagen? He was coming off of a spinning back kick victory and a flying knee knockout over Frankie Edgar. What do you want out of this? Like,
exactly.
What kind of fighters are you promoting if that's not the guy? Like this guy who 100%. Has 2 knockout wins in a row. You're like, yeah, but TJ. You're like, man, show that guy's promos. It is sick what Cory Sandhagen has been doing at bantamweight.
Exactly. He's quite literally a human highlight reel,
Yeah.
The spinning back kick of Marlon Moraes, we haven't seen that in the bantamweight division in how long? Years.
Yeah.
The flying knee, we haven't seen that in the bantamweight division since Marlon Moraes did it himself against Aljamain Sterling. But even that wasn't a flying knee. Sterling shot him for the takedown and Moraes timed him on the knee. Comparing that to, say, the lead up to Rob Font and Cody Garbrandt a few months ago, yes, they're promoting Cody as a former champion, but he's a former champion that fell on hard times, came back with a big knockout victory, and now they're trying to promote him back into being a potential future champion.
Sure.
But I'm completely on board with that because he's a marketable guy, he sells pay-per-views, he's quite a big name, and he didn't cheat. Quite simply put, he didn't cheat. So that, I agree with the promotion of Cody Garbrandt because why not promote him? He's done nothing wrong apart from lose 3 fights in a row, and that's not his fault per se. But if you can see where I'm coming from, it's he's done nothing wrong but lose 3 fights, bounce back with a big knockout, and then obviously the Rob Font fight is what it is. I completely echo your point of why are they not promoting Sandhagen? This is a promotable guy outside of the octagon, but even more so inside of the octagon. He's getting highlight reel knockout. That Frankie Edgar knockout, you can play the whole fight.
You can play the whole fight.
You can play the whole fight as a preview. If not, you've got that 5-second clip of him backing up to the fence and throwing the flying knee.
So good.
Why is that? Why have I not seen that just on replay on the UFC, retweeting it on that full fight? You put the full fight on YouTube. It's the full fight lasts 30 seconds, so the whole YouTube video would be 5 minutes long, including the introductions and the post-fight interview. But instead, we're getting TJ Dillashaw this, TJ Dillashaw that. It's frustrating because, in my opinion, they're promoting the wrong guys, and this is why people are still seeing cage fighting as this, or MMA as cage fighting, I should say. It's 2 savages going at each other without any rules, blood all over the place. steroid use, blah, blah, blah. And of
Right.
course, people are going to see this if this is what you're promoting, but you're not promoting the Cory Sandhagens of the world, or the, further down the card, the Yanez Costas of the world, that are two just mixed martial artists just going at it. Respect at the end, respect before the fight, and it's a competition in there. You're promoting guys that are intentionally injecting EPO. And like you say, how long has he been doing it? Yes, they tested his old samples, but he popped 4 years ago for a fight, but we're only finding this out 4 years later. Well, there's nothing you can do about that. You can scratch it off his record, but everyone's going to know that he knocked out Cody twice, or he finished Barral twice, or it's frustrating, but there's what can you do? That they're going to promote who they want to promote. Going into this weekend, I haven't seen any promotion for Hall or Strickland, but none of which have ever popped for EPO.
No, and
yes,
Hall's
they're not former champions, but it is what it is.
Hall's a good boy too. You should be promoting him as much as possible. But yeah, I do agree 100%. With you with an odd choice to promote Dillashaw. Like this is the Dillashaw show is what we've been seeing. But the UFC, a lot of people also think the UFC is blameless in terms of like, this is a self-promoting sport. You guys need to promote yourself first. And if you guys are promoting yourself, we'll promote you. But that's not true. The UFC has shown that they can actually promote pretty good fighters extremely well. Like Suga Sean O'Malley has more of a big name than most of the top 10 in every division in the UFC. And he has wins over competition, right? So the UFC has shown time and again that if they chose to put the hard sell on fighters, they can.
Yeah, 100%. Like putting a British spin on it, they promoted Darren Till a lot.
Yes, that's a good one.
Had him. I think he was rushed into the title fight against Woodley, but they had him headlining an entire, pretty much bought the UFC to Liverpool for him.
Yes.
There's no denying that.
Yeah.
But he headlined in Poland against Cowboy.
Sure.
But at the same time, he's that kind of guy that he was in the UFC for a while. Then he took a bit of time away. Then he came back and he got the big wins over, I think it's Bojan Vilicevic, then the Cowboy, then Thompson. Then obviously he fell on a couple of hard times, two losses in a row. But you're looking at someone who outside of the ring, yes, he's had his, he's been arrested before, but he's a normal, relatable guy that you can, especially coming from the UK, you can relate to him. He's not been handed anything. He's worked hard for everything. He's in the gym all the time, but he's also got his, his business ventures on the side. Push those types of guys, and which they did with Darren Till, and obviously it backfired with Darren Till because he lost the title fight, lost to Masvidal, and now they're trying to build him back up again. Fight Brunson later on in the year. And same with Sean O'Malley. Yes, he took a step back when he lost to Vera, but he's promoting himself outside of the ring. He's through good ventures. He's on Twitch all the time. I know I don't watch his streams or anything, but I know that he's on Twitch a lot. He has his own podcast. So he's promoting himself in the right way outside of the ring. And I'm sure that he's got hundreds of other little side, hustles. But it's the people that the bantamweight, the UFC choose to promote in bantamweight so far has been, in the past couple of years, TJ, Suga Sean O'Malley, and Cody Garbrandt. They're the three that they've gone heavy in on. They're not promoting the current champion Aljamain Sterling, maybe because of the contentious fight that he had with Petr Yan. Didn't promote Yan very well because arguably it's difficult to promote him when he doesn't speak English or very good English. Mm-hmm. They're struggling, I think, to, they can't do a 30-minute sit-down interview with him because people will just get bored listening to a translator.
Yeah.
Cory Sandhagen, number 3, haven't barely any promotion. So it's the three people they're promoting are all easy to promote as well. Cody speaks well and, looks good when he fights against Dominic Cruz with slipping out of the way, and you can cut that and you can
cool stuff.
Exactly. You can cut that and you can put it in a highlight package. TJ, you can cut his highlights in the ring and put it in a highlight package, and same with O'Malley. The knockout of one just speaks for itself. With that being said, outside of the ring, Cody Garbrandt doesn't really do anything wrong from what I've seen personally. Neither does Sean O'Malley. He promotes himself very well on podcasts and Twitch and whatnot. Outside of the ring, TJ Dillashaw pops 3PO, but still gets a big push from the UFC. I can't understand it myself. But
So we're running out of time here. However, let's finish up what the title picture is looking like. So finally, we have the official date. October 30th is what we're looking for the bantamweight title picture between Petr Yan, is looking to make a comeback and avenge his victory against Aljamain Sterling. Finally, we got a date set. I guess TJ will face the winner of this fight, but I think Petr Yan could be a really good marketing case because the way he fights, and the way he talks as well, even with the English translations and the few words that we get in English, he really represents that like cold as ice Russian killing machine is how you can really market this guy, because that's how he fights. His knockouts against like Uriah Faber and Aldo, where he pummeled him for minutes at a time. I'm a huge fan of Yan. And I'm a huge fan of Sterling. I picked Sterling in their first fight, and I was technically correct. But in their second fight, I will pick Yan going in. And I think Yan
100%.
also beats Dillashaw. What do you see in this one?
I think I did the same. I think I picked Sterling going in.
You were right.
Yeah. And I was lucky with the finish. But at the same time, Yan was on his way to winning the fight. Handily as well, in my opinion. I think Sterling came out thinking, if I sort of almost a Mexican way of fighting, I'll put my head on his chest and I'll stay in his face for 25 minutes, but he just didn't have the cardio to deal with it, and he was getting swept and tripped all the time. Whenever he was beginning to get a bit of offense off, Yan would take him down. He wasn't able to get Yan down and do anything major on the floor, so I think Yan wins that one pretty handily, especially if he can not get himself disqualified. I mean, who knows with this crazy sport, but I think he wins that fight fairly easily, to be honest. And then it's going to be TJ for the next title shot. But if I was Sandhagen, I stay ready.
Yep.
Because apparently he had a unwritten sort of agreement with Sean Shelby that he is still only going to be one fight away from a title shot, which, especially after the contentious way, if he was knocked out in the first round or dominated 50-45, that doesn't happen. But because it was such a close fight, this fight, if he goes on to fight a Cody Garbrandt or a Rob Font and beats them, straight back in the title picture without a question. Probably next in line. Because who doesn't want to see Dillashaw Sandhagen 2 for the belt?
Oh yeah,
everyone would sign up for that. And like you say, October, you're looking at maybe early 2022 for the Dillashaw Yan or Sterling fight, and then maybe, depending on how that goes, hopefully we won't see a rematch, because rematches are good when they're necessary, like in the Yan Sterling fight now. But if Yan loses to Dillashaw and they rematch, it holds up the division too much. You then got the next 4 title fights in the bantamweight division have all been contested, but by just 3 guys, and it holds up the division a little. You want to see Sandhagen having an opportunity, Rob Font having an opportunity. I think this is why middleweight works so well, because you've had Adesanya win the belt off Whittaker, then you've had him face Costa, Romero, Vittori, Gastelum for the interim. He's fighting different people, and they're all got different styles, different games that could, on paper, cause him trouble. That's why the heavyweight division is slightly dead, because you've had you've had Stipe and Ngannou, 3 DC Stipe fights, Stipe Ngannou, and now luckily we've got new blood in Cyril Gane and Derek Lewis competing in a couple of weeks for the interim belt. But then the winner of that faces Ngannou. Yes, if Lewis wins, it'll be a rematch, but if Gane wins, it's a new fight. But the rematch isn't going to be anything like the first fight. And then you've maybe got a Stipe fight after that, or a John Jones that you bring into. So it's beginning to, it was stale, and then now it's beginning to roll in the right direction. I think that's what's happening in bantamweight, because you've got so many contenders. Cody Garbrandt's 1 or 2 wins away from another title shot. You got, is it Munoz Aldo next weekend? The weekend after next, I believe.
Yeah, I think so. You got Rob Font up there.
Rob Font. You've got Merab Dvalishvili versus Marlon Moraes. I know that's booked. I can't remember when it's for. So,
Dominic Cruz. Dominic Cruz is still just floating around.
Exactly. Now you bring TJ in from the outside, because obviously he wasn't ranked. You bring him in from the outside. On the cusp, Sean O'Malley needs a big fight against a big name next, and he could be in the title picture. So And now, you know, we were talking earlier about Yanez being probably getting a top 15 guy next. You've got Marlon Vera, who could, you know, is always a couple of wins away from a top 5 sort of position. So anyone in the top 10 within 1 or 2 wins could be in the title picture. And there's a lot of marketable guys in that bantamweight division as well. It's not like, you know, it's not like, I can't think of an example. It's not like maybe featherweight division where outside of Max, Brian Ortega and Volkanovski, you're struggling for marketable guys. Yair Rodriguez doesn't fight often enough to be too marketable.
Yeah.
Same with Zabit. You know, you've got Gegard Chikadze who's coming through and is becoming a little bit more vocal on Twitter. But even then, you know, not the casual fan won't have heard of it. The casual fan's probably going to have seen Sean O'Malley's knockouts, going to have seen Cody's knockouts, going to know TJ Dillashaw, Dominic Cruz. You at least recognize the face. So they're easy to promote, these guys. It's really exciting, the bantamweight division. I think probably is the strongest division in the UFC.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think back in February, I wrote an article saying like bantamweight is by far the most interesting division in the UFC. It's probably the most competitive. Top 15 is just an incredible list of guys, of knockout artists and former champions. And it took so long for us to actually get moving in this division. It was this fight, and then we're not seeing the other fight till October, but I'm glad we're seeing some movement finally, because it's such an awesome division. But yeah, I think we're out of time for today. I think we made it, but yeah, last word.
I think we did. Yeah, just one last thing. I wrote an article, I think 2 or 3 years ago now, about trying to work out the bantamweight division, like who goes where and who fights who. And it was a mess a good 2 years ago, and I think TJ just was going down to fight Henry, and we had Cody on the outside, we had Pedro Munoz coming through, we had Aljamain Sterling, and Petr Yan hadn't really fought anyone, but it was looking like a killer. And now it's all just beginning to fall into place, and we've got a top 5 at least, but a top 8 that could all, you know, if the 8th guy, I don't know who the 8th guy is, but if the 8th guy got a title shot on short notice, you know, 24 hours notice, I wouldn't be mad at it at all. And I think it would be a competitive fight.
Totally co-sign with, like, I think it's such a good division top to bottom that any of those names, put their names in a hat, draw them out in any style. I don't care. All those matchups are fun matchups, right?
Exactly. Even a tournament style, I wouldn't say no to, but
I'm down for a tournament. You know, I'm an old school boy. Give me a tournament. My name's Tim Wheaton, at Tim Wheaton MMA. Check us out on MMASucka. Frazer Krohn, he is the editor at MMASucka. Frazer, give us the last word. Where can we find more of you? What's going on this week?
Yeah, Frazer_Krohn on Twitter. We'll be all over MMASucka. This card this weekend isn't too strong, but we've got a good strong Bellator card that will have results, previews, and staff picks for. And then I think me and Tim are going to link up next week a little bit earlier for a little bit of a review of this weekend's card, and then mainly a preview of the big fight, the big pay-per-view card in a couple of weeks' time. And awesome. We'll be back with some fantasy matchmaking again next week, so keep an eye out on that.
Cheers. Thanks for listening, folks.
Thank you.